Hello and welcome to Flanagan's Wake, a Doof Media podcast hoping to get invited to Mike Flanagan's crock potluck. My name is Scott Daly, and joining me, as always, Father forgive him, he knows not what he does. It's Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
What I do?
Oh, you know, you don't know.
I plead innocent due to not knowing what I'm doing.
Rejected. This week on the show, we are taking one final look at Mike Flanagan's Midnight Mass. This is our overview episode, and it's going to be a good one, folks. Just a little bit later on the show, we are going to be joined by Pastor Phillip Higginbotham from the United Methodist Church. He is here to set us straight, Matt. He's here to tell us what we got wrong about Catholicism and Christianity. We actually have already had that conversation, and it went really well. Pastor Phillip was wonderful. It was really insightful view into another lens, another angle on which to view this wonderful show. So look forward to that. Before we get there, I just wanted to sync up with you, Matt. It's been a week since you watched the end of the show. How you feeling? How you feeling about Midnight Mass?
I'm feeling better than ever. So, I guess the biggest thing on my mind is, as I've talked about for the last 2 or 3 weeks, I started watching the show with my oldest child, my oldest daughter, and so I was sort of doing a parallel rewatch while doing the rewatch that I'm doing to talk about it with you. Mm-hmm. So I rewatched the last episode a week ago, and then I rewatched the last episode last night with my daughter, and that was us finishing the show together. And if anything, it just really cemented this as like an all-time piece of art, because her reaction, first of all, it was sort of charming how much her reactions are reminiscent of my reactions, even though I didn't, tell her these things, but she was basically like, how do you make something like that? And I was like, exactly. Like, isn't it inspiring to have a piece of art that comes together like that? And where, as we've said many times, each episode it builds on the last and carries you into this journey, and then just leaves you emotionally uplifted and devastated and feeling things you've never felt before on the shoreline. I don't know. It was great, vicariously reliving it, watching it with her. That's one of the joys of having kids, is you get to enjoy things almost totally fresh.
Sure.
So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit, because that was amazing, and we had a really great conversation about it afterward, and the kind of conversation that you can only really have when the art that you're discussing is that strong, right? Yeah. A really far-ranging conversation that's not just about the art, but about the ideas.
Yeah. No, I love that. I'm so happy that you got to experience that. I'm so happy that your daughter got to experience that, and I hope you get to have those similar experiences with your other 2 children as they get old enough. That's really cool. Yeah, I mean, I really I sit here a week removed from it. I didn't rewatch the entire show in between this week and last week, but I did revisit some episodes. I went back, watched the first one, I watched the 5th one, and I watched the finale again because I didn't get enough of it last week. And really, my takeaway, outside of everything else we're going to talk about a little bit later, I really just feel like the show is an absolute miracle. And I mean that in the most ironic way possible. But also, when you think about it, I think it's just kind of true that sometimes the really great art has to happen in a way that doesn't really make sense to. I mean, we call it lightning in a bottle, right? This is a thing we like to, that like someone captured something at a very specific time and place and was able to create it, and at any other time and place it wouldn't have been like that, but somehow it did. And that is what the show, I mean, listen to what Mike Flanagan says about it, right? Like, if the show had been made earlier, it would have been a disaster. That's his words. And if the show had been made any later, Netflix would have meddled in it. But it was made in the exact right time for it, and had the exact circumstances to where it got to be exactly what the people making it wanted it to be. and they didn't have to compromise. They didn't have to settle. It just got to be this complete vision of itself. And that almost never happens. And it just so happened to make this show what it was. And that's a fucking miracle.
Yeah.
And am I saying that God created a global pandemic and killed millions of people so that Midnight Mass would be created? No. But
still, though.
But maybe.
Yeah, the miraculous element that keeps occurring to me, by the way, is I was thinking about the metaphor of burning the boats, except in this case it's not a metaphor, where they did the whole show and then they fucking burned down the town.
Yeah.
And when Netflix was like, you need to do some reshoots because we need more fangs, they were like, we can't, we burned down the town. And it was perfect, right?
Hey, you got Netflix, you want to pay for us to rebuild the entire town?
Yeah. Isn't it great? Yeah. Isn't it? It's like burning the boats, except it's like, no, we burned the set when we were done because we weren't going to let anything happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's great. I love it.
It is great. It is remarkable, and it is unique. And one of the things that Mike said, one of the only comments on the interview that we got a comment on the interview I found very interesting, which is someone basically said, I disagree that Midnight Mass is a divisive thing. That like the commentator was basically saying everyone I know that has watched the show absolutely loves the show. And I think that's generally true for me too, but I think I always like to do research into these things as we get into them, not just researching the production itself, but also researching just like how people reacted to it. And there is, every time you bring up Midnight Mass, there is a contingent of people that are like, the vampires don't come till like halfway through the show. It's got these too long monologues. Nothing happens. It's so slow. It's just people talking, yada, yada, yada. These kind of complaints. Right. And it's just, so I guess what I'm saying is I do think sometimes the best art is divisive in this kind of way. That I do think Midnight Mass is not going to appeal to everyone, that not everyone is going to approach this thing the same way, and they're going to want different things out of it, and there are going to be people that are left unfulfilled by it. But I think it's miraculous because it doesn't Mike talked a lot about how part of his job is this synthesis of what he wants to do and what the studio wants him to do and what people want to see. And like, that is a reality of the world we live in. That's just how you have to do it. And he's I think on top of being an incredible artist, he's also, I think, just very savvy at playing the game that needs to be played in order to make it in this business. I think he's good at it. Obviously we're seeing he's good at it. He continues to see success after success after success. And that's great. And I love that for him. And I love that for us. I also think it's cool that sometimes the stars align where you just get to throw that other shit out of the way and you just make something that you want. And it doesn't have to think about those other two factors. It just gets to be the thing that you want. I wish that all artists could have great success in their careers and get to do that thing as well. And it's very cool to me. And it remains my favorite of the things he's done, precisely because this is, of all the things he's done, all of which I love, this is the one thing that is truly just exactly what he wanted it to be.
Yeah.
And I think that's so cool.
Yeah, I agree with all that. That's true. It's lightning in a bottle, to bring it full circle. Mm-hmm. And I think it's fun to think about, because it's like, as we see his career progress, he gets more, what's the word I'm looking for? Leeway. Leeway is close enough.
Sure.
To basically just trust, trust to be like, hey, maybe he doesn't get so many studio notes, because it's like, this is Mike Flanagan, he knows what he's doing, And earlier in the career, you don't have that trust. Maybe later in the career, you have that trust, and I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird. I would say yes and no, because one of the things is he's, as he said, he's more involved in the studio system than ever, and as you get more involved in that system, your budgets go up, then the people are much more interested in making sure what you're doing is appealing to the largest amount of people possible. So
True.
I think it is a yes. I think it is absolutely true that the reason he was allowed to go off with Midnight Mass and just kind of do his thing was because of the success of Hill House, right? That earned him the trust and success. So those things will always remain important. But again, that's the miracle of it. Like if these shows had come in any different order, they wouldn't have happened. And if they came later, it wouldn't have happened for one reason or another. And it's pretty remarkable. We have the Midnight Club coming up. You know, Mike gestured towards a lot of things that I look forward to kind of figuring out as we go through that show as well. A little bit more meddling, a little bit more notes, and it's going to be really interesting to see if that's noticeable as we go through that show versus the show. I think it's going to be. I'm as much as like I'm sad that we are about to leave my favorite Mike Flanagan thing behind. It felt like these 8 weeks just flew by, and I can't believe we're already done with it. I am very excited about what's next for different reasons.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you tell me what is your favorite monologue in this show?
I think the Sheriff Hassan monologue, and I answer that so quickly because I just watched that, a couple nights ago with my daughter, and rewatching it twice in relatively rapid succession. The sort of the structure of how it's written kind of pops out.
Yeah,
you know how when you rewatch stuff, you notice more context.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to say that. And I just was thinking about it just like as a piece of writing with its own heartbeat.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is just a fucking great monologue. Like I was honestly like, actually after we finished watching it, we were talking about the monologues. I was talking about this with my daughter, and we were like, hey, we should each like pick a monologue and memorize it and then like act it. And like, this should be a thing that we do for fun. And we agreed that would be awesome and that we should do that. And I was like, I'm going to memorize the Sheriff Hassan monologue. And then as soon as I said that, I was like, I'm actually going to do that now. Like, even if it's not a thing I do with my daughter, I'm like, it's not that long. I can memorize it. That'd be fun. And I do think it's like, okay, super well written and super well written in a way that it's got it. Again, it feels good to listen to.
Yeah.
And then of course it helps that it's incredibly well performed by Raul Coley and all that.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
it's fantastic.
I'm so glad you brought this up because I was listening back to that episode of ours talking about it, and I realized that like we got caught up in one thing or another.
Uh-huh.
And I realized that we didn't. I think we said Raul Coley did a really good job with his monologue. Sometimes his English accent came through, and then I was like, "Is that all?" I was listening to myself? Is that all I said about his performance? This incredible performance? That's all? And I was like, "Fuck!" So I'm really glad you brought this up because I get to kind of revisit that and be like, no, he acts the absolute shit out of that scene. And you're absolutely right. The writing is one thing I noticed that I forgot to bring up was the tense of the verbs he uses in the monologue, where like sometimes it's using like I did this, I did that, but there's moments where the tense kind of shifts, and so I go and complain, like where he shifts from present tense, or he shifts from past tense to present tense in like key moments of the monologue to I think make you feel a little bit more, for lack of a better term, present in the actual choices that he's making there, and I think that I can't even fully explain why that elevated it to me, but it did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think literally what you said, it makes it immediate for you.
Yeah.
Verbs are powerful stuff, man.
Yeah, they are.
Stephen King says this too.
But no, I appreciate you bringing that up. Raul Coley is excellent in the show, and that is that the show gives him that moment to just like, once again, this is one of the many reasons why actors like working with Mike Flanagan is because he gets to go like, all right, I have this cool role for you and I'm going to give you money, but also in one episode, you're just going to get to do like a 5-minute, just act your ass off thing. And you're going to get it in every single thing I do. It's great.
Yeah. How about you?
I kind of still want to go back to the dueling monologues in episode 4 in Lamentations. But I do also really like Aaron's final monologue in the show. And I think once again, listening back to that episode, I think we got a little caught up in the overarching movements of the plot of the episode and how that monologue ties into those plots. And we didn't, in my estimation, or I didn't spend enough time talking just about how good that is as just an independent piece of writing. Because I think this, that quote, like, we are just the cosmos dreaming of itself, is just like beautiful writing. And I think that, like, on top of being this perfect cap and tying everything together, I also just think that one's incredibly performed once again, and just very well written, and I like brings me to tears every time I hear it. And the direction of that scene is really interesting too, because the dueling monologues, we did this, it was a one take where we had Riley on one side, he gives him monologue, that's a oneer. Then we go Erin on her side, she gives her monologue, that's a oneer. When we have Kate Siegel's performance in this monologue, it is not a one take. We are cutting multiple times. We are cutting, I mean, we are cutting between like her on the couch and then Riley's reaction to her on the couch. But then we are also cutting to her laying down on the ground dying, and then we are also cutting to other characters as they prepare to greet their oncoming death. And so it's like there's a lot of directorial flourishes in there of when we cut, and I really love the moments that we cut, that we cut to Riley in that moment. Who is Riley in that moment? Is she just imagining something? Is this the remnants of Riley? There's no answers there, as the show often does, but I think there's a beautiful moment at the very end of the monologue where he just smiles. I think it's after she said that's what we mean when we that's what God is. And he just gets this big smile on his face, and I just I loved all that.
I agree. It's like he's the part of the universe that is Riley, and he is there, and he has always been there.
Yeah.
I what you said about the directorial flourish, that was a whole part of the last episode that I feel like we didn't talk about at all. And I noticed it a lot on my rewatch last night. Was like there are all these fantastic shots and cuts, and like when the vampires are going from house to house, there's these like amazing shots where like you see the door open and there's the 3 dark silhouettes with the glowing eyes hunched in the doorway, and they lunge in. There's so much shit like that, like throughout I can't even name all of it. That there's the bell rings, and every time the bell rings, we cut to a different person reacting and turning, and in some fantastically framed shot. It's like the style is just all over the place. I love it.
There was one when Mildred is walking into the church at the very beginning of the episode. We cut to a shot of a candle in the foreground and Mildred walking down the aisle up to the pulpit where Father Paul is sitting, and they're out of focus in the background. The candle is in focus in the foreground, and it's just the single candle with just like a little trail of blood down the side of it. And that was one of those where I was just like, oh, that's some photography shit right there. I love that.
Yeah, me too.
One other thing, speaking of direction and blocking and that kind of thing, that I meant to mention last week and I just forgot. When Paul and Mildred have their whole conversation about the sparrows and death and all that stuff and what he really did it for, they are sitting on the stage. They're sitting on the stage next to where the pulpit is. So they are in this elevated position. They are where priests go. That is, the only priests are supposed to go there. And then he does all this stuff. And then the next time we see them is when Bev has rung the bell and then is walking into the church and sees the two of them, and they've moved. They're not on the stage anymore. They are just sitting in the pews. So it's a really kind of clever, just through the movement of characters through the scene and where they started and where they finished, he has come down from this high position. He is no longer a priest. He is a parishioner at that point. And the show doesn't say this, right? It's just like, that is something I picked up on when I was watching the show again. And I was like, oh, I really like that. I really like that subtle choice there, to demonstrate Paul's kind of full understanding of what he has done and the consequences of what he has done. That he hasn't thrown away his collar yet. That's not till his final moments, but he has kind of removed himself from that position of authority.
Yeah. They're sort of more penitent rather than taking authority. Yeah, that's great. I like that. That's great.
Yeah, no, great looking show. I agree. Sometimes we get so wrapped up in the themes and the plot that I forget to be like, oh yeah, by the way, this show looks awesome. Because it really does look awesome. All the stuff with the sun and the sunrise at the end of the episode was just gorgeous. Just absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah. I mean, the whole show is beautifully shot, but this, because, you know, there's so many dramatic moments, there's so many incredibly framed shots where, I mean, almost any moment you could just kind of frame it, right? It's the every frame of painting thing where it's incredibly dramatic, like a Renaissance painting, because of the subject matter of what's happening. And then also it's got the lighting, and we've talked a lot about the lighting. I don't feel like we've given the lighting short shrift, actually.
Yeah.
But it continues to be true in this episode where it's nighttime, and so things are generally lit by fires, you know, or moonlight or what have you, and generally never artificial light.
Yeah.
Because the power's out, and that gives the whole episode this really cool visual style, this really unique.
Totally, I agree. Yeah, because I mean, the entire episode takes place at night, so
yeah,
it's Flanagan like reaching his full potential of darkness. Yeah. So I mean, I just to wrap it all up, I adore this show. I really do, and I think there's always a worry, and I know you and I have talked about this before. There's always a worry when we really like zoom in on something and spend as much time and energy picking it apart and analyzing it, that like it loses a little bit of the magic of the thing. You know what I mean? Because like most people enjoy stuff by just like watching it and being like, wow, that was great. And I always have that worry every time I go into something that I truly love, because like, am I gonna ruin this by doing this? And I think the thing that I've learned throughout this entire process is the truly great art, like, cannot be ruined in that way. Like you can examine it with a microscope and see every bit how it works, and even in the small moments when it doesn't, which I talked about, like my one thing I didn't like last week. But you will still be able to like step back and appreciate it at large, just like for the incredible accomplishment it is.
Yeah. I think it's, you know, just because you've explained how something works doesn't mean you've explained it away.
Yeah.
In fact, you can add to your appreciation for it by knowing those extra dimensions.
Yeah, but don't you think there's like, maybe this is just me, but I'm like, if something's like really emotional and emotionally impactful, that we get so clinical with it sometimes that it's like, what about just the fact that, hey, this is sad, or hey, this is scary, or hey, this is awesome, you know?
I totally agree with the sentiment. It's just I also agree with the second part, which is that relatively rarely happens. I mean, the very first thing we did together, I was like, oh no, if I made a mistake, am I going to ruin Worm for myself because I chose to do this Worm podcast with you? On the contrary, I ended up loving it even more than I had beforehand. And I think that maybe one way of saying it is that becomes even more true for the things that are the best. Is you just enrich your experience of it by studying it, actually.
Yeah.
And I think that's 100% true for this.
Absolutely. What a wonderful show. An absolute pleasure to get to chat with you about it for 2 months.
Yeah.
And I think we will throw it now to our conversation with Pastor Phillip. So hope you guys enjoy this, and we'll see you on the other side. All right, we are so excited today to have Pastor Phillip Higginbotham to join us here. Pastor, you know, this kind of funny thing happened where we had started the show, and I was thinking to myself, like, maybe it would be good to get someone who knows what they're talking about on the show. We're going to be spending the next 7 to 8 weeks talking a lot about religion from a perspective of two people that were raised Catholic and then got the heck out of there. Maybe it would be good to have someone else's perspective. And within a couple days of like having that thought was when you reached out to me on Reddit to just kind of offer your services, as it were, to come talk with us. And I absolutely jumped on the chance. So very excited to have you here. Excited to talk to you all about Midnight Mass and your perspective on it.
Sure. And you've couched that over the past couple of weeks as, he's going to come in and tell us everything that we got wrong. And
yeah.
The good news, Scott and Matt, a lot of what you've said up to this point jives with me. Now, this is me as a person, and, I'm a pastor in the United Methodist Church, but I'm obviously not speaking for the church on any of this, any of these sort of theological things that we dive into. It's just kind of me. It's where I've come to, and 10 years from now, I may think differently on these things. I know I thought differently on these things 10 years ago. So
for our listeners that aren't as familiar with the different sects of Christianity, and frankly also for myself, what is like the big differences between, we'll use Catholicism here specifically because that is the primary focus of the show. What is the big kind of fundamental differences between Catholicism and the United Methodist Church? When I was a kid, I believe someone described it as like Catholic light.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's an offensive thing to say or not.
I don't know if it's offensive. I joined this tradition about a decade ago. I grew up in a Southern Baptist tradition, which is very different than both of these. And then as I moved into this, one of the things that we appreciated about it, my wife was raised in a Baptist / Southern Catholic home, and which is a very weird dynamic in and of itself. But she liked the liturgy and some of the things. So Catholic light is actually something I've heard before, and it's not all that far off. We are definitely Protestant. We have a very Wesleyan sort of tradition and theology, because John Wesley is sort of a central figure in the beginning of the Methodist Church. And so a lot of Wesleyan ideas, which I know to some people just sounds like gobbledygook, and I understand that. But as you dive further into theology, there are different schools, and we are folks that glom onto a lot of Wesley's sort of theology, but firmly Protestant. And so that makes a little bit of that gives a little bit of color to this show, because, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but this show has to lean hard on some Catholic ideology that I just don't necessarily agree with on sort of a theological basis. And so some of the things that Father Paul is able to accomplish would not happen in more of a Protestant sort of denomination in most places. And I think we'll talk about why that is here a little later.
No, that sounds great. So I guess what kind of called you to become a pastor? Like how did that process go?
I in high school, I hung out with my youth minister in high school. I was raised in, like I said, different tradition, the Southern Baptist tradition. And I'm hanging out with him one day, and we're watching a Star Wars marathon at the church on spring break. And he's like playing ping pong, and we're watching Star Wars, and we're eating pizza. And I'm like, that's this guy's job. I want to do that. Like that's the job I want. And so I started talking to him. Ultimately, that turned into something richer and more. I committed to join the ministry, specifically in youth ministry, and then went off to school. And there's a time where that story gets really wonky. It's over a girl, and it's not very interesting. And most people have stories like that. But I sort of walked away from the church and ministry and all that kind of stuff for about 10 years. Started a family, and my wife came in one day and said, I was working on swimming pools and lifeguards. That's kind of what I'd become. And she goes, "You're not happy. When were you happy?" And I was like, I think I was happiest when I was learning to go into the ministry. And she's like, "Okay, then let's do that." And I'm really fulfilled in the ministry. I did youth ministry for 15 years or so. And then about 4 years ago, I had to step into an associate pastor sort of role, and found that I was really gifted and that fulfilled me in a special way I didn't even know I was missing. And so I made myself available for appointment. 4 years ago, they appointed me down here on the coast of Texas, and we've been here ever since. I I am made for this. This is the job that I am. This is my purpose. We're going to talk a little bit about purpose today, and Riley
Sure.
is a character that's all about purpose, and this is my purpose. And I found that, and that's great.
That's
I
awesome.
hope everybody finds that.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about the education.
Sure.
So, for people like me, my impression of what the clergy do is they stand up in front of me and they give a ceremony, and then they go off, and I have no idea what they do for the
Right.
and I don't know like what do you study? How much of it is theology versus practical, nuts and bolts? How do I take care of a community? I have no idea. I just wish you'd educate me about this.
Well, being a pastor is great. We only work half a day a week, so that's awesome. No, obviously there's some pastoral care, taking care of folks that are part of our congregation, and so if somebody's in the hospital, we're going to go and spend some time there. If there are ministries in our area that we can support and lift up, we do that. A large part of my week is preparing for Sunday, because there's a lot. What's crazy about being a pastor is no matter how recently you just finished up Sunday worship, there's another Sunday coming. It's right around the corner, and people are expecting something the same, because liturgy, especially in the Methodist Church, certainly in the Catholic Church, is part of it. But they also want something different too. They do not want to hear you give the same thing, the same talk, the same points every Sunday. And so there is a certain amount of that. Education-wise, you have pastors that have very little education. I'm one of those. I don't have a bachelor's degree. I quit school because of that girl, and we don't need to talk about that anymore. But I've moved on into real world. So I have a real world education, and I spent a lot of time in the real world. Because I don't have a degree in my pathway as a pastor at the Methodist Church, there's continuing education classes that I'm consistently taking. I'm finishing up on a preaching class right now, just a class about how to be a better preacher, and some tips and tricks, and not tricks, but just some ways to do that better and be a better. And I have one of those classes I'm enrolled in virtually all the time, because I don't have a degree. Then you have pastors that have doctorate degrees, and you know them because they say, call me doctor, reverend, whatever. And they'll tell you it's a lot of work, and they want you to recognize that work, just like anybody who's been through that sort of academic world. They work hard at it, and they want that recognition. So education wise, we can come from a lot of different places, and mine has been a real world education. I talked with somebody once that said, "Oh, you don't have an education." And I said, "Well, I don't have a diploma that I hang on the wall, but I've learned how to do ministry just, sometimes by failing terribly at it. I've learned what to do and what not to do. I do have an education. It's just not something that has a diploma that I hang."
Yeah. Well, over the years, that consistent continuing education is a lot of learning time, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Ultimately, the goal is for it to all balance out, whether you do have your master's in divinity or your doctorate, or you're going through what we call course of study, which is what I'm going through. Ultimately, at some point, it's to get you all to basically the same place.
I love, you just mentioned courses on how to give sermons. That's actually one of the few questions that I wrote down was how do you learn to do sermons? Because to me it's such an impressive skill, and it always has been. I don't, I know there's probably more to it than you can go into quickly, but just an overview would be great.
Well, part of it is just being a public speaker, and if you're afraid of that, and a lot of people are, you don't want to be a pastor. You're gonna be You're going to be doing that once a week forever. That's just the job. That's how it works. Early in my high school career, I thought I was going to be a lawyer. And so I started with speech and debate my freshman year of high school, and went through all of that. I took a lot of communications classes in college. If I ever go back and finish a bachelor's degree, it will be in communication. So I've never had any issue with embarrassing myself in front of people. Hence why I'm here today. I have no problem talking, hearing myself talk. My daughters say that I just love to hear myself talk. Maybe there's a certain amount of that. You guys have mentioned before, as you've talked through this particular show, that a certain amount of ego is involved in being a pastor or a preacher, and that's true. Like there is a certain amount of ego that just has to be there. If you don't have that, you're gonna have a difficult time. But then you listen to sermons. So I'll let you in, and everybody else that listens in, on a big secret is we will grab ideas from anywhere we can get them. And that means sometimes from other preachers. That means, and the good ones will certainly cite that and say, hey, I've heard a preacher that said this and I really like that, and here's why. Some will just straight up steal it. It just is one of those things. It's a little like being a comedian and stealing someone else's material. And you just listen, you find your own style. I don't preach like anybody else I've ever, but I preach like everybody else I've ever learned under or appreciated. Like I don't preach like any of them, but I do preach like all of them. I've developed certain things and taken some certain things and, become the preacher that I am through sort of some repetition and then just some, I think everybody that starts preaching starts out imitating and then they develop their own style along the way. And that's kind of where I've gotten to over the past few years. I used to be a big imitator. Like I imitated what I had heard all my life. And so I was a very, Southern Baptist sort of style preacher. I'm not that guy anymore. I'm much more of a Wesleyan sort of guy. I've just kind of developed into a different style.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool.
Yeah.
One more just quick softball question for you.
You bet.
Why do bad things happen to good people? And as a follow-up question to that, what happens when we die? Just real quick.
Yeah, no, easy stuff. Hey, look, that is what starts all of this. Like those questions, those two questions, Riley says at one point in the show that it all starts with looking up at the stars and seeing these campfires out there and thinking about what those kind of people are. I don't want to tell Mike Flanagan he's wrong. That's certainly part of it, but I think it really all starts with those two questions. Like what happens after all of this? Mm-hmm. And why does there seem to be an imbalance? If there is someone who has designed and created and put this together, and is in control, quote unquote, all powerful, then how in the world is it so out of whack? Why do bad things happen to good people? And why do good things happen to bad people is just as real of a question for us to deal with. If I had like great answers for that, I would be preaching a lot more than every Sunday. I'd be on some sort of lecture tour and giving that answer out. And I don't have those. I have those answers for me, which I think is a big part of this show is you have to find personally where you fall. I think that's kind of where Aaron comes to by the end of this whole experience is, for me, like, am I speaking for me? Because if I'm speaking for me, I'm comfortable speaking. And I think that's where everybody kind of has to get to is, for me, it deals a lot with, as far as bad things and good people, it deals a lot with free will. Like there is in my heart, I feel like there is an intelligent creator that's all powerful, but he has also imbibed us with free will to do what we want to do. And that means when my free will hurts somebody, it's not that he can't control it or fix it, but he has decided for whatever reason not to. He has decided to be hands off and allow us the free will because he doesn't want to force us into loving or chasing after him or following him because a force that direction is not real. He could make that happen, but free will has to be a part of this equation or it's just not worth anything. And because we have free will, we get to hurt each other and we get to mess things up. And I think that grieves him. I don't think he's happy about it, but I also don't think he's going to step in and right all the wrongs yet. One day, I believe that will happen, but not yet, not currently.
Great. Simple answers. No, I appreciate that. No,
Sure.
No, honestly, I do.
I mean, God works in mysterious ways, Scott. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate you being candid about it, and there, like what I like most about the show is that it doesn't offer any answers to any of these questions. Right. It just merely asks the questions and shows every single one of its characters struggling with what those answers are. Even the most devout to the atheist characters. Like, this is, I think it's great because these are fundamental questions of faith, but they are also fundamental questions of humanity. These are the things that we all think about, whether we believe in a God or not. And I think that's one of, like, this is a show that I think could be very alienating to people who have, like, never really studied Christianity or believe in any of it, but it's not, because it does also tap into, I think, just a lot of fundamentals of being a human being living on the planet.
Well, and I think there's a version of this show that attacks religion and attacks the church. I think at one time this story was that, if we're to take Mike Flanagan at his word when you guys had him on not too long ago, it is not that. Like, I truly believe in everything that I am and everything that I do, and I absolutely love where this show comes from, because religion, the church, is not the bad guy. There's other things. There are things within the church that is the bad guy. But if I were to sit here and say, well, the church can't be bad because it's the church, I wouldn't be here, because I wouldn't enjoy this show, and you guys wouldn't want to hear from somebody that has that sort of opinion anyway.
Yeah,
so.
Sure.
Obviously, the show does have a lot to say about the church, but it was one of the things I actually wanted to talk to you about, is how nuanced and, sort of patient it is with all these different characters, and how one way you could look at these characters in the show is they're sort of archetypal people of faith of different kinds, right? Yes. You've got Annie and her quiet steadfastness. You've got Erin and her sort of prodigal nature, where she returns to the church after going off and having a different life. You've got Riley's atheism in response to some horrible event that happened. You've got Bev's fanaticism. I could keep going. I just wonder, I don't know. I just want to see if this resonates with you and see what you think about it.
You have Ed, who is a man of faith because his wife is a woman of faith. Like, he does not have a faith of his own. His faith is his wife's. I think that's very clear through the show. And I know people like that. I know people like all of these people. Living in the world that I live in, I've encountered all of these people. And you're right. It draws out. I think that it's amazing that our two antagonists, human antagonists, in this show are two very different people who ultimately really mess things up on Crockett Island. Father Paul is well-meaning. He means well, but he ends up doing some terrible things. And we can talk about, maybe why that is. And then you've got Bev, who is not well-meaning. She is all about power and control and being the one that is first in line. Mm-hmm. And that rots itself in a way that makes you hate her. I love that they never give her a moment of redemption. I love that at the end, you almost think that she's going to, you talked about this, Scott, last week. You almost think that she's going to calmly and serenely accept her fate. And I was almost, the first time I watched it, a little let down by that. And then she starts digging and I'm like, yes, that is the Bev that I need right there. That's who I want to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So from your perspective, when we look at a character like Father Paul, who is just this wonderfully nuanced, complicated character, what are the things that stuck out about him to you, as a person that may not dealt with Catholic priests, but has dealt with people in this line of work and this calling, and the people that believe these things and have to stand in front of a congregation and try to encourage and help people as they suffer through the difficulties of their life?
So years ago, my wife, right after we'd gotten married, got me a book from the library that was written by a Catholic bishop. She wanted me to read it because she wanted me to have some idea of where half her family, her mother's side of the family, comes from. And I really didn't have any basis for that. And so she's like, here's at least a starter course on that. And I read this whole book from this bishop, and I only remember one thing, but it was very profound, and helped me understand a lot of the differences between where I come from in a Protestant sort of world and then a Catholic world. And that is that in the Protestant world, if my pastor or the church or someone above me says something that is counter to what I understand in Scripture, the pastor, the church is wrong, because the pastor and the church gather their authority from the Scripture. However, in a Catholic sort of mentality, that is flipped, where the Scripture gains its authority from the church that combined it and put it together and allowed it to be out there. So what does that mean for Midnight Mass? I think Father Paul would have a much harder time in a good, solid faith community, which I think he has. It's dying and it's small, but there are good people of faith in this community. He would have a much harder time as a Protestant minister than he does as a Catholic minister in this sort of context, because he is the church. And if it's coming from him, even if it's counter to what Scripture is telling me, then maybe he knows something I don't know. Maybe he has information that I don't have. He gets to make those calls that are counter to Scripture. And that leads to part of who Father Paul is and how he gets so messed up. We believe Wesleyan theology, and I'll just give you a real quick thing on this. We have this thing called the Wesleyan quadrilateral, which was not from John Wesley, but it is a quadrilateral. It is 4 sides, the first side being Scripture, and that's what everything is based on. And then you have experience, reason, and tradition. And all of these things come together to inform what you think, what you believe, and how you come to where you are. Well, if we apply that to Father Paul, he uses experience and he uses his reason, but he never leans into his tradition. In fact, he leans away at times from his tradition. He goes into a confession booth to confess to no one. That doesn't happen. That's not the way this works. He confesses, you guys brought up when he went into the confession booth, he confesses before he commits the sin. That's not how this works. He gives communion to someone that is not confirmed. That's not how this works. He does this over and over again. So he doesn't lean into his tradition. And when he contacts Scripture, it is not the basis. It is another thing that can be twisted in his reason and experience. And so he gets very off track because he's not relying on some of the things that are meant to kind of anchor us in Scripture, and our church tradition are meant to anchor us, and he kind of lets those go, and is able to go anywhere and does just that.
Yeah, that's I love that. I mean, I never thought about it that way. First of all, I guess from within the frame of the story, he would say, well, I had a divine revelation. You know, I have, this is my excuse, right? and obviously he's simply mistaken about the nature of what has happened to him. But I feel like, yeah, like you said, tradition and a structure of community to kind of put him in check would also help constrain the worst of his mistakes, even if he did believe that he had a divine experience. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, I really love that point because, like, I mean, definitely in the show, we see people react in different ways to the things he's saying and the things that he's doing. But what we never see is anyone trying to push him on it, ever. Like, we see people, like, get uncomfortable. We see Mildred walk out of the church and be like, that's not the man that I know. But, like, nowhere in the show does anyone ever be like, hey, what you're doing, what you're saying right here seems to be out of line with my understanding of how this whole thing works. I mean, the most we have is Bev doing that, but Bev is doing it from a very like specific kind of, like, when she calls him out on the chasuble, when she is trying to force him back to just what she wants. But no one is ever like, I was like, Father, I'm struggling with the things that you said in Mass yesterday. Because they don't seem to line up with my understanding of how Jesus Christ works. And I think that's a really great point, that is kind of part of the Catholic Church, that the priest is elevated, the priest is above, the priest knows, and all that goes up until you get to the Pope, who is he himself infallible and speaks with the word of God, which even as a Catholic, I was always kind of like, really?
It even goes further than that. These people have lived in a community where their pastor, their priest, has become Monsignor Pruitt, which means he has been given a special title directly from Vatican City, from the Pope.
Sure.
And so they have been trained even more so that so even if Paul is not the same guy, you don't live under this pastor for 40 years or 50 years or whatever it is, and then, oh, well, it's a different guy, I'm going to just treat him differently. No, that's ingrained at that point. And so even though Paul at first is a different person, they still aren't going to question him because that's not the way they do things.
I like that, especially in like one thing we are told, we never get to see, but we're told that Monsignor Pruitt has been not all there for a while by the time the show starts. And essentially this is like the worst kept secret in the town, that this guy, his mental faculties are fading. And so he is a spiritual leader. He is a leader of the Catholic community in this town that is mostly Catholic people, but he is fully incapable of that kind of leadership anymore because he's suffering from a horrible disease. But everyone just kind of accepts it. And I think a lot of people, it's out of kindness. Like it is out of, like, this man is this pillar of the community. They love him. They don't want to see him brought down low like that. But it ends up is that this is a community that is completely leaderless. And then therefore led by Bev. And then when a leader does return, they are all like very excited and very anxious to like fall in line very quickly.
I mean, we get in first episode, I think it's first episode, Warren is talking about the fact that the altar boys have to lead Pruitt around the chancel area just to perform mass.
Yeah.
He shouldn't be doing this job anymore. He shouldn't be the one responsible for the faith of these people anymore. Not that he wasn't a wonderful person. I don't know. We don't know. We don't get that part of the story. But where he is now, he shouldn't be. And nobody's willing to step up and say that. And that's unfortunate because it leads to so much of this.
Sure. So, sorry, go ahead, Matt.
No, I'm just, this is kind of great because you're giving me an angle that I just, we watched this whole show. We had all these conversations and never quite thought about it in the way you're putting it to us right now, where it's really, I've had, various experiences in my life with like, professors or, martial arts teachers or whatever, where it's like, they're so cool that I would do anything they said, and like this is a dynamic it's like very easy to just naturally arise amongst people. Right. And he's in this isolated community, like you said, especially when he comes back as Father Paul, he's this cool, charismatic guy. It's very easy for him to create this environment where nobody's going to say no to him. That's an element that was in the show that it just didn't like pop out to me until you said that.
Yeah. Now they'll argue with Bev, but she'll put them down real quickly. She's learned how to handle that, and she knows exactly how to deal with that. But they don't. I can't think. I didn't go through the show looking for it, but I can't think of a time where anybody directly confronts Father Paul or Monsignor Pruitt at any point and says, "This is wrong. You're wrong."
It's only Riley, and I think that's part of the
true.
point too.
Right.
Is only someone outside of the thing can actually feel comfortable to confront him on any of that.
Right, and Riley is justified in confronting him because we get the story of the mouse, where he just admits, like, I lied to you, I tricked you, and sustained your faith for a decade. Aren't I cool? And Riley's going, no, you're not cool, man. That's not okay.
What was your reaction to that as a pastor? Like what is your take on that whole?
It's just incredibly manipulative. I can't imagine. People put their trust in you as a pastor, as a priest, as anybody. They're putting a certain amount of trust in you to be as honest with them as you can. Now, look, have I ever told a lie? Not as far as you guys know, but of course I have, and I'm human. And so I'm not perfect, but this goes beyond that. This is something that is a conscious effort to trick a child into believing something that isn't true. And that's just, I feel like my job is to present to you where I'm coming from on this path of discipleship and hope that you walk along with me as part of my congregation. And, if you do, I'm going to be as honest with you as I can in those moments to tell you where I'm at so that you can walk along with me. But if I betray that and try to look, there's lots of pastors out there. There's lots of folks who call themselves pastor, I should say, that use trickery and putting on a good show to justify what they do. They are wrong. They are charlatans. They are not. I do not consider myself to be in the same class as those people. And Paul here, or Pruitt here, kind of tips his hand, and he's one of those people, even though he wouldn't think of himself that way.
No, this is great because I never thought of it this way, but this is really our only big window into what kind of priest he was like, because we don't really ever see Monsignor Pruitt as like what kind of priest he was like, right? And so this is a pretty big window into what Father Paul was like when he was Monsignor Pruitt, what he was like as a pastor or a father when he was younger. The other thing, listening to you talk about this clocked for me. By doing what he did to Riley, he actually set him up for failure later. Absolutely. Because he didn't equip him for the idea that sometimes terrible things happen and you need to learn to deal with that and deal with the fact that God is not going to step in those moments, that this mouse is not going to be resurrected. That's not what God does. And then So later in life, when Riley makes a horrible decision and a terrible result happens, he's not equipped in his faith to deal with that. And his response is basically just, well, then this can't be real. And it's like, I never thought about it, but it's like Father Paul or Monsignor Pruitt set him up for that by tricking him that this is how faith works. Yes, the mouse was actually resurrected. That's how it works. When something good happen, God will act in this moment and do something physical and tangible and do this thing for you. And then suddenly it doesn't happen over here, and his faith is totally shattered.
Right, because if God will resurrect a mouse, a field mouse, when I was 10 years old, how can that same God that cares that much about this tiny little insignificant creature allow what has just happened here on this street?
Yeah. So he says, I sustained your faith for 10 years, but I think what he did ultimately was ensure its destruction, because he is not equipped to deal with that at all. Yeah. I never thought of it that way, but yeah, no, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So you mentioned kind of a little bit earlier about the idea of purpose and with Riley, and I'm just curious what your take, let's just talk about Riley maybe in a little bit more detail there. Sure. Like, he comes in, he's the atheist, but he's the very specific kind of atheist in this world, that he is the former Catholic atheist, which is a specific kind of breed, one that Matt and I both understand very well. What was your take on Riley watching the show?
So what's really interesting to me about Riley is his search throughout the whole show, from the moment he steps off of the ferry onto the island. He wants a purpose. He wants to do something. Mm-hmm. He wants to be of value. He tries to find that fishing with his dad. He's not really needed there because his dad is getting better and Warren is able to help. And so that's not where it fits. Mm-hmm. It might be with Aaron, but that's going to be way, way, way down the road. And I'm not sure that he sees that as purpose so much as just taking up time. But what we're given all the way through the show from the very beginning is that he is being imbibed with purpose, the purpose that he ultimately sets out and fulfills from the beginning of the show. I think it's very interesting that the show is written by a confirmed, a man who calls himself an atheist. And yet we get signals throughout this show of divine moving of the chess pieces to make this all happen in some way. Now, you can say that's not God. You can say it's Ka or the writer. It is. It is all of those things. But if we look into the story, he's getting dreams that mean something. They are important. They are leading somewhere. But he's getting those before he ever has any idea what those are leading to. Where are they coming from? Mm-hmm. Well, they're coming from the writer's pen. We know that. But what is the writer telling us with this? It is telling us that his purpose is going to lead him to that boat in the water at sunrise. And that is ultimately where his purpose brings him. Nobody is better set up to deal with what's going to happen on Crockett Island than Riley. Riley's whole thing with RR and this addictive voice recognition is being able to tell himself no when his body is crying out for it, is recognizing the addictive voice. And so when he is turned by accident, there is no one else that is better equipped to be able to say, no, I reject that. I don't need to drink, whether it's alcohol or the blood. I don't need that. He is there for a purpose. He is searching for a purpose through this whole 5 episodes that he's in, where he is slowly walking to ultimately what his purpose is. Now, it's not the purpose we want as the audience. I think we're all very frustrated that my daughters watched this with me. I have 2 college-age daughters, and they've watched this show with me, and my middle daughter was just almost in tears because she wanted Riley and Aaron to, vanquish the foe and ride off into the sunset together in some sort of eucatastrophe. And that doesn't happen. We don't get that. And she was moved to, she was pretty upset. No, this isn't how it's supposed to go. And it is how it's supposed to go. It's how it's meant to be from the start.
I love that. I love the contradiction of this whole thing, right? And
Right.
Matt and I tried to talk about this, but I'm glad you're highlighting this. Is that this is a show that is examining and extremely critical of religion, extremely critical of these people within these power structures within religion.
Which, Scott, let me say, religion has earned. Christianity has earned.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, it's fair to cast a weary eye toward religion and Christianity in today's day and age. Like, I'm not, we've earned it. It's fair.
Sure. And that's why it's like, it's a show that I don't think someone who is not an atheist could make, but I also don't think someone who was not at least at one point in their life Christian could make as well, because it is a really fascinating fusion of a lot of like conflicting ideologies. And it is like, I think the more you think about it, the more like this is the things that are just like in turmoil within its creator himself, within Mike Flanagan, that like these are the questions and the inner turmoil that he went through and is probably still going through today. Because I don't think, I mean, this was true with me, and I'm sure it's like, you don't like one day wake up and say, okay, I don't believe in that anymore, and then you just like file it off and like never think about it again. I don't think that's how that works. No. I think you're like constantly thinking about it and reassessing and like trying to figure out what you do and don't believe. Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
No, I was interrupting you repeatedly. Just like, especially the way Mike Flanagan describes his experience of like trying to read all of the, reading the Bible and then reading all the other holy books.
Yeah. I
really relate to this experience of, losing my faith and being like, no, I don't want to lose my faith. Mm-hmm. I want this to all be true because it's beautiful and there's so much. And like, maybe like I'm probably projecting somewhat onto Mike Flanagan, but I'm like, I see all these pieces of this religion and this dogma that is beautiful, and it actually kind of sucks that I have to basically abdicate it because I can't claim to have any faith anymore.
Well, you don't.
It doesn't feel. I mean, it's been a long time, honestly, but it's just like, look, it doesn't feel right to be like, yes, I'm Catholic. I have 0% faith in anything supernatural, but I'm sure. like it doesn't make sense,
But yeah, I mean, I guess you don't need to identify or subscribe to anything like specifically. You can just kind of decide for yourself what you do and don't believe. And
yeah, sure. Well, I guess to anchor it in the show, I mean, I feel like that's the position that the writer is in, is like,
yes,
I love these ideas. These are beautiful. It would be beautiful if the universe worked this way. So for this story, the universe works this way.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. And the characters are going to struggle with the fact that they're going to struggle with all the same things that the author struggles with.
Yeah.
Which is like, it really doesn't, none of this seems clear or evident to me, but then it works this mysterious way.
But to Phil's point, like like, I think spoilers for The Stand, just I'll say, like, the difference between the way this story ends and the way The Stand ends is this story ends with what Phil mentioned, which was that there is clearly something at work here pushing and everyone to be in the right place at the right time, type of thing. And yeah, we'll call that writing, we'll call that Ka, we'll call that coincidence, whatever we want to call it, but there's some external force pushing on these things. In The Stand, the much the same thing happens, but in Stephen King's The Stand, it is literally the hand of God that comes out of this and is like declaratively God. It is in that story, this is happening because of God.
Right.
In this story, it's happening. It's just there's no definitive answer as to what that external force pushing and manipulating and sending people on their path is. Now, a person could look at it and say, that's God. That is God. That this is the power of God. This is God doing what God does. And another person could just be like, this is the cosmos. This is the universe. This is, anyone could have 100 different interpretations of those same ideas. And I think that is kind of fundamental to what Midnight Mass is ultimately doing.
But it's true for us here on Earth.
Sure.
Like in the real world, we see things happen. We see things work out. And I ascribe those to God works. God works things out to his plan. But someone who does not believe what I believe sees something else and explains that another way. And we're just kind of hardwired to believe there's something bigger. That doesn't mean that we all do. That doesn't mean that, but I truly believe humans are just kind of wired to look for something bigger than us.
Sure.
Because so often things work out that way.
Yeah. I mean, I told the anecdote at the beginning of this conversation about how I had this thought of bringing someone on that could speak to this stuff more personally. And then you messaged me within a couple days. Now, that's probably just a coincidence, but as easily could be interpreted a different way, right? I mean, that's the way the world works, especially when you come to it through different viewpoints and different beliefs.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So
go ahead.
Well, yeah, I don't know if this is a perfectly organic segue, but I wanted to hear your thoughts on the nature of evil in the show, and we can center that on the angel, or we can not center that on the angel. I just wanted to see what you think about evil as it pertains to the show, or maybe in general.
So the ultimate evil in Midnight Mass to me is not it's not Pruitt or Paul Hill or whatever you want to call him. It's not even Bev Keane, although she makes a real good try. Like, she tries really hard to be what it is. It's not the angel to me. I think it is simply the idea of certainty. Certainty is the antagonist of this. When people are certain of things, things go bad. And that's true of any of the characters that we run across. I don't think Riley is ever certain about anything, and so he tends to come off as our protagonist. I think Erin is less certain about things, and so she comes off as somewhat of a shadow protagonist. Bev Keane is very certain, and she's evil. The angel, by its very nature, is certain of what it is because it has such a base function that it does not think about larger things, and so it is certain. It is evil. Paul becomes certain of things. Father Paul becomes certain of things, and that is evil. Even Annie and Ed, who are good people, we find that out by the end. We understand that they are good. They fall into this trap, and they're kind of mirrored to me by Dolly and Wade. They're sort of both sides of this coin, where one of them is good and one of them is not. And again, it all comes down to certainty. They're both certain. Both couples are certain to a certain degree. I don't like the way I said that. But
I do. That was great.
But they're certain to a certain degree, and we see how that plays out by the end of it. So I really think the evil here is being certain of things, because we can't be. I know what I believe. I'm very staunch in that belief, obviously, or I wouldn't do what I do. But can I tell you with no question in my mind that that's exactly the way things work? No. no, I can't. And I don't believe anybody who can. Like, I don't trust anyone who can tell you that. I'm very uncertain. And so my beliefs may alter and change as I grow and learn and walk down this path a little further. And I think that is ultimately the evil that we're presented with in midnight mass is certainty, which leads to fanaticism. And that's where we go with this particular piece.
Awesome. Yeah. I agree that, you know, it's funny how little time we spend talking about the angel, you know, which is a vampire, right? It's fun to call it the angel.
Right.
But because, like you said, it's base. It's almost just an animal. It's not that interesting to talk about. It's which I love. I love that element of the show.
It's essentially a MacGuffin in the story, right? It's not a character. It serves to kick the plot ball forward, but that's essentially it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The island itself is much more of a character than the angel, the vampire, the demon, whatever you want to call it. My wife keeps calling it a demon, and I think that's a fair read on it too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love that it remains mysterious and there is no specific explanation for it. I think that helps make the message of the show a little clearer, I think.
Yeah, my wife and I, as we were talking about this, she goes, "Where did it come from? Like, where? It doesn't matter. It's not important. Yeah. That's not part of the deal." Like,
what you said also got me thinking a little bit about Erin Green, because I think one thing that is interesting about her is we see her as the person who kind of tried to get away from Crockett, succeeded, and then eventually kind of comes back. And when she comes back with her faith. And I think the show never really dives into specifically like what it dives into what brought her back to Crockett specifically. It doesn't really ever dive into what brought her back to her faith. And I think that's really interesting, especially considering her wonderful monologue that caps off the show is a declarative statement for Mike Flanagan and what he believes, I think, but also a declarative statement for what she ultimately believes, right? It is different from what she says happened to her daughter when her daughter died. It is kind of a mesh and melding of those concepts and ideas. And so I think that helps kind of show how this experience has been transformative to her. But I think it's interesting that we don't ever answer that question of like, and I decided I wanted to be Catholic again because XYZ. I decided I believed in God again because XYZ.
Yeah, I guess I always just thought it was what was comfortable.
Yeah.
She went out and was uncomfortable, and it led her to a place that she didn't want to be. And so she kind of overcorrected a little bit and went back to where she was very comfortable, back to her mother's home to take her mother's job and live in her mother's church. And even though she didn't like her mother, she didn't feel that motherly connection with her. That is what is familiar and what is comfortable. And so she kind of retreats into that for a time. And it turns out to be a very important time because it leads to her death. But for a time, she has just retreated into what is comfortable.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that a lot. That's great.
Yeah, I agree for what it's worth. It's not even something she thought about. It's just
maybe that's why we don't highlight it, because she hasn't given much thought to it as well. I like the idea that it's like, well, when I lived here, this is what I did, and so I live here again, and so that's what I'm going to do, because I tried to do another thing and that didn't work out for me. And
it's not like she went floridly atheist the way Riley did. She just sort of floated away and then came back, and there was no reason not to, you know.
Yeah, but I don't know. I guess my read between the lines of her was that she was always like, she went to church because her mom told her to type person, not like I'm like really committed in the church and my faith.
And
like that, the dynamic was between Riley and her, that he was like the faithful, good Catholic, and she was not.
The story of people becoming adults, becoming 18, becoming adults out on their own, wandering away from their faith, and then finding something that draws them in, especially a child, drawing them back into the faith, is to told over and over and over again. That's
Sure.
in some ways my story. And so
Mhm.
I think she is just an avatar for something that is very often the case is folks move away through a period of their life, and then about a decade later, begin to gravitate back to what they've always sort of known.
Mhm. So what would you as a pastor like say, like if like let's put you in the chair opposite of Riley for a sec. He's someone who has done this terrible thing, and he's lost his way, he's looking for purpose, and he's completely lost his faith. If you had to sit across from him and try to help him through this, like what kind of things would you say to Riley? Would it be that much different from some of the early conversations that Father Paul has with him?
I think it would, because I feel like one repeated watches, you begin to understand. I think, Matt, you've voiced this over the past couple of weeks. You begin to realize and recognize how manipulative Paul is being, even from the start.
Mhm.
And so I think it would be different in moments like that, whatever those moments are. And I do deal with them from time to time as a pastor. I find it best to not have anything ready to say, because platitudes are no good. God works in mysterious ways. All things work to the good. All of these things that I believe. I mean, I believe that's true, but I also believe that's not going to do you any good in this moment, in this
Mhm.
time. It's not going to, so much of Riley is about forgiveness. And Scripture tells us that when we repent of our sins, that God throws our sin as far as the east is from the west, which is imagery that I really love, because you can't look both directions at the same time. You can't look east and west. And so if he throws them as far as the east is from the west, that means you've got to pick one. You've got to either go toward repentance, or you've got to go back toward what your sin was. And so you have to make a choice. And I love that sort of imagery. Well, that's great. God forgives me and he separates me from my sin. That's wonderful. And for people that don't believe that, Riley or anyone else, absolution from God doesn't mean anything, but that's only part of the problem. The real problem is, can you forgive yourself? This is something Riley can't do.
Mhm.
Riley can't find it in his heart to forgive himself. He can't get the absolution that he needs to forgive himself, because he's done something terrible and he just feels guilt over it. Um, and that's the struggle that he deals with. Well, in those moments, there's nothing that I can say to you as a pastor or your pastor that will change that until you come to the realization that the only person that is demanding forgiveness right now is me, and the only person that can forgive me is me. I think my favorite, you talk, Scott, in one of the episodes about your favorite scene being the dual monologues about what happens when we die.
Mhm.
One of my favorite scenes in all of TV, full stop, is Lisa visiting Joe Colley in his trailer
Yeah.
and forgiving him, and then telling him that because she can forgive him, and then the way she voices it, she says, if God can forgive you, and he says he can, he says it over and over again, he says it all the time. If he can forgive you, then I can forgive you. And if I can forgive you, then you can forgive yourself. And that just breaks him in a way that causes him to change.
Yeah.
And it's really, really powerful. It is. I've watched that particular 5 or 6 minutes of that show over and over and over again, because I think it is just a beautiful picture of forgiveness.
Yeah. I completely agree, and the irony of the fact that I think one of my favorite things Mike said talking about Midnight Mass in the interview is that he didn't really learn and understand forgiveness and the power of forgiveness until after he had left the church, which to me is like a fundamental failure of the church to
Yes.
impart, because that seems like that's like the core fundamental thing of Christianity is the power of forgiveness, and
Yeah.
for a person to not really find and understand that until they leave the church, it's like something didn't work there. So someone failed
I,
there.
I think that's true, but also I think that you've got to have a certain amount of life behind you before you even appreciate the value of some of these things.
That's true. Yeah.
But when I left the church, I hadn't made enough mistakes to appreciate the value of forgiveness yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's a very easy thing to look at and understand as a child when you really don't you really haven't messed up enough, or had enough happen to you. That like the concept of forgiveness is, I think we talked about this. It's very easy to forgive someone for something that hasn't affected you at all, right?
Right.
Like,
Right.
you hurt that person, I forgive you for that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the irony of, I do love the moment in the final episode where
Yes.
Sturge goes
and
to
Uker.
Uker and
Yeah.
says, "You forgive me, kid?" And he goes, "Yeah, I forgive you." It's like, well, you
That's-
didn't. I mean, I guess in that, like, it is part Sturge's fault that Uker is a vampire. so I get it there, but like, it is very easy to forgive someone for something that didn't hurt you directly, right?
Sure. Hey, can we talk a little bit about music and the way
Sure.
that this show uses music? I've really been I've been intrigued by the musical selections that they picked, and we heard Mike Flanagan say that at one time it was just hymns. That was the score for this was hymns, and so I started there, and I started really looking at. I think there are kind of 4 hymns, and I think they make kind of an arc here. We start with this "Abide with Me" in the first episode. It is a montage that we use, and then we hear it repeated a couple of times early in the episode, just musically. "Abide with Me" is a plea for God to come in and fix things. We're dying, we're struggling, we're hurting. Come in and fix it, and then go away again. Abide with me, come in and fix it. And I think that's what Crockett Island as a character, because I think it's a character, wants, is come fix things, but then everything should go back to the way it was. And we can take it from there. Thank you for fixing it. Now let me play with my toy. And we transition from that with Riley and Aaron as we get to know more with them and connect with them to Were You There? And Were You There is an African spiritual. It is something that makes the crucifixion of Jesus personal, because we were there. It is almost accusatory. Weren't you there? Didn't you see? Weren't you part of the crowd that crucified Jesus? It requires you to take a certain amount of complicity in what has gone wrong, which is not where Abide with Me is. Abide with Me is, this isn't our fault, please come fix it. Were You There, especially with Aaron and Ryan, Aaron and Riley, is we have a part in this. We have something about this. Then there's this shift that happens at the Easter Vigil, where they sing together as they march down the road. Scott, I sent you something about this, and I think I sent it to you too late. And I'm kind of glad I did, because I get to talk a little bit about this instead of talking about something that you guys talked about 2 weeks ago. Holy God, we praise thy name is the name of the hymn that they're singing as they walk along with candles to the Easter Vigil. It's a beautiful song, and it's done beautifully by the Newton brothers, which I was so kind of floored by the idea that the Newton brothers are not named Newton or brothers. I loved that little piece that we got from Mike Flanagan.
Yeah.
But what you should know, and what I'm sure that Mike Flanagan and his team knew, is that Holy God, we praise thy name is actually a German hymn. And it is a hymn that became sort of a banner hymn for Hitler's Third Reich. In fact, they even rewrote verses of it to praise the Fuhrer. And so it is this, the hymn itself is fine, but its history is couched in this thing that makes you very uncomfortable when you know it.
Yeah.
And when you come across it. And it fits so perfectly into that scene, because it's a beautiful hymn, but you feel uneasy the entire time they are singing and marching toward the church. And then, of course, everything sort of ends with this "Nearer, my God, to thee," a posture of surrender, of accepting judgment. And then, of course, we have to, Mike Flanagan is not unaware that this was a big thing in the Titanic, because there was some movie that was apparently very important back in the 90s that made us all aware that "Nearer, my God, to thee" was something that was played as the boat went down. And so this surrender or acceptance. And I love there at the end that we don't finish the hymn, that we're left in sort of a rapturous moment. The only person we see burn up is the one unrepentant person that we know of. It's Bev. Yeah. We get Ali and his father are welcomed into bright light. It's not really a burning. We get the same thing for Paul and Mildred as they sit with Sarah on the bridge. And then the rest of the town, as they're singing Nearer My God to Thee, do not finish the hymn, but they are just gone. They are just caught up and not like rescued, but, relieved of this burden that they've put on themselves. And I think it's beautiful that there is this arc. And again, I've glommed onto your ideas, you guys' idea of the author is a genius and everything is on purpose. And so if that is true, this arc that kind of weaves its way through the whole show in music tells the story, I think specifically of Crockett Island, of the character of the island itself. And so I really think that that's just genius, and none of this is wasted. Even if you don't know all of that information, it's there, and it reinforces all of this.
No, I love that, and yeah, you sent me that little bit about Holy God, we praise thy name, and I was like, oh, holy shit, that was like, whether or not that was intentional or known by the Newton brothers or Mike Flanagan, and I agree with you, almost certainly was when they were choosing that hymn. It just informs it regardless of whether they were aware of that or not. It carries this feeling with it. That the second you told me that, I was like, oh yeah, of course, that lines up so perfectly. So yeah, I think that was, I agree with you. Like, I mean, I told Mike this, and I was just like, I've been humming these hymns through my house since I started watching the show. And like, I can't even think of a time in my life that I did that I was humming Christian hymns. It just beautifully composed music that I think perfectly fits every moment. I mean, I think that Near My God to Thee, like, is the perfect way to end the show. And I agree with you. And I love what you said about it builds in kind of an arc, a story within the music itself. I think that's great.
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing we haven't talked about the music nearly as much as we should have, I think.
Sure.
Especially, I mean, I think in general, we don't do the best job at talking about music because neither of us ever quite know what to say.
It's good. I like music.
Yeah, it sounded good. But in this show in particular, like, there are whole stretches where we're just listening to these hymns. Like, but we're watching stuff happening, sure, but we're really listening to the hymns. The mix is way up. You can hear every word they're saying very clearly, and we hear a long stretch of it, right? So the words that we're hearing are important. It's not just, trivia that was the hymn that was being sung. It's the actual substance of the show. So no, it's very, very relevant. I like especially drawing attention to like the different textures of the different hymns. I don't know what other word to use, but like, I've always thought it was interesting how different hymns or different prayers will have a different feeling, where some of them some of them feel very humble. And then some of them feel almost self-aggrandizing to me, where it's like about how I like asking you to do this for me, God. And I always, even when I was religious, I always felt really weird praying certain prayers because I was like, who am I to be asking God for something? Like, that it feels weird to me. But like the one that you mentioned, Holy God, we praise thy name, is like, it's hype. It's like, yes, God is awesome and he's so powerful and he's going to do all this awesome stuff. And that's like very muscular. And that's kind of the feeling that all the congregation has at that point in the story. So that's really cool.
Yeah. I also just can't get over, like, since Mike told us that he is singing the hymns, I hear him constantly, and I don't know if that's just my brain doing that, but like, since he said that, every time I listen to these hymns, I'm like, oh, yep, that layer right there, that's Mike Flanagan's voice. I recognize that. I think my brain's just making it up, but I thought that was really cool too, that he literally put himself in it.
Yeah.
Multiple times.
Yeah.
And more power to him. Like, keep going, man. Keep putting yourself in all your stuff and make more stuff. Like, we need plenty of Mike Flanagan storytelling. I love it.
Yeah. So, Pastor, what did you have anything else you wanted to make sure you got to explore with us here?
No, probably not. I hate Bev. Like, I want to take a moment and make it very clear that, like, I know people like this. I know that this is the people that keep people away from the church, is they're afraid that it's all Bev. And I also know that in a way we've earned that too.
Sure.
And man, I wish that, if there's anybody that hears this and it's just like, that's why I can't go to church, is because they're all like that. They're just not. There are going to be people like that. Miss Carmody, Margaret White, Bev Keane, they're going to be those people. They're going to exist. But there are also really good people. And for that matter, when they're not a caricature of evil, even those people are not bad people, I don't believe. They're misinformed and they're doing the wrong thing. But if that's what's keeping you away, if everything else lines up and you're like, I really like this Jesus guy, I just can't stand the people. Well, there's probably like 20 churches in your town. Find one where the people are good, where on a whole the people are okay, and walk that path of discipleship that you're feeling called to. Bev is awful, but Bev she is the only one. Scott, I think you mentioned this a few weeks ago about reading a review where she just was very flat. I don't think she's flat. I think she's actually a pretty rich character, but she is a caricature of a certain kind of people around the church, and it's a fair one, but it is not all, and it's not even most. Like, they're the loudest, which is unfortunate, that they are the ones that get the most attention around the church, but don't let those people be the only reason that you don't connect with something that you feel called to or led to.
Yeah, it felt to me like, Mike talked about he was very angry, and there was a version of the story that was a lot angrier. It felt to me like all the anger that he had left in him when it came time to actually make this show was channeled into this character, which is very fair. She is the absolute worst.
The worst. And I love that he doesn't give her, I think I've already mentioned this, but I love that he doesn't give her the redemption that he almost does. I almost felt let down at the end of the show when she stops and she's looking at the sun serenely, and she's going to accept this. She's going to repent in some small way, and I have to feel a different way about her than I feel about her. And I didn't want that. And thank goodness she starts digging, so I don't have to feel that way. I can just not like her.
Maybe I'm making this up, but I feel like I'm not. I rewatched the last episode again because I've been watching it with my daughter. We watched the final episode last night. Fantastic experience, by the way. And I swear, when she's finally giving Father Paul her final kind of talking to, her eyes are like pulsing red. Actually, it's not just the same sort of eerie white. It's like satanic red. And again, I don't know if that's like an optical effect or what, but I was like, that's cool. I like that. Yeah, she's bad. Great. She's evil. She sucks.
She's bad. She's bad.
I do have to say, after watching the last 2 episodes, after hearing from Mike Flanagan, he kind of ruined something about the show for me, in that all I see in the dark scenes, which is a large portion of the last 2 episodes, is dark. All I see is the compression now. All I can see is the streaming compression that they're doing, and big blocks of black because they're not giving it its full due. And that's it was driving me crazy today as I was watching the final episode for the second or third time. And all I could see were these big blocks of black. And I'm like, see, this is what Mike Flanagan hates about streaming stuff. And I'm with him. I don't like this either.
Yeah. Welcome to my world. Yeah. This bothers me every time I watch something on streaming. I have this nice, expensive television. It's supposed to be streamed to me in 4K. And yet the compression is just right there.
Yeah. I love what he said. There's technically that many pixels, but
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Maybe one day we'll get blessed with a physical copy. We'll see. I'm holding out hope for it.
It would be great because I had never noticed it before. Now, the first time I watched this, I was actually testing out my I'd gotten one of those little mini projectors you can get off Amazon for Christmas, and I had set it on the floor of my bedroom, and I had just a flat white ceiling, and I was projecting it up on the ceiling with this bulb that shouldn't be doing any work on a projector anyway. You can't buy a good projector for $50 or whatever it was. But that's how I watched this scene first, like all the lights out in my bedroom with it, large on the TV. So I didn't pick up any of that, but now I've got this 4K TV and everything looks great when there's light, but when there's not light, it doesn't work as well. So I'm with you, Scott. I'm ready for physical media so that I can enjoy this the way that he wants it to be enjoyed, the way he wants it to. And I'll be first in line. I'll be one of the first in line to buy it because the reason I watched this, Scott, was you on Kingslingers recommending it to Matt over the microphone. And I was like, okay, I'll give it a try. If Scott likes it, then I'll see if I like it. If it's King adjacent, and I think it is. I think it's got some of that same sort of DNA of storytelling. I'll give it a try, and I fell in love with it. And so it's your fault, Scott.
Well, that is the highest compliment you can pay me, and I appreciate that. And thank you so much for taking the time to come here. This was great. I really appreciate your perspective. It really helps us kind of process everything we've been trying to talk about and explain from a new great perspective. So thank you so much. This was great.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks again to Pastor Phillip. That was a wonderful conversation. We hope you guys enjoyed it. Man, that was great. And I think that's going to do it for Midnight Mass for us, Matt. That's it. We are officially done. We are moving on. Next week, we are going to be covering The Midnight Club by Christopher Pike. We are going to be doing just one single episode on Christopher Pike's The Midnight Club. It's a short book. It's a book meant for younger people, for teenagers. So it's about 200 short pages. So don't worry if you haven't started reading it yet. I think if you jump on it right now, you'll be able to finish it in enough time. But we're going to cover that book in a single episode, and then we're going to move on to the next show about that book. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, bittersweet to finish Midnight Mass, but excited to move on to this.
Yep.
All right. Remember, you can reach us via email at flanagan'swakepod@gmail.com, over on X at flanagan'swake19, and on the subreddit at reddit.com/r/doofmedia. That's the best place to hang out. No discussion question today, but just kind of chill and talk to other people and look at what other podcasts we got going on.
Yep. I guess that's a good point. We should say the discussion question that we asked a couple weeks ago, we're just going to push that one on to next week's episode. So that'll be the, what was it again? Vampire science. Yeah.
Vampire science.
Yeah.
Or just, scientific explanations for supernatural things. Yeah.
Please also head over to doofmedia.myshopify.com if you want some merch. There's stickers, there's mugs, there's shirts, there's jackets, there's art. It's all great and it's all there. And we hope you guys check it out. doofmedia.myshopify.com.
That's right. And if you want to support us, then please head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia. We've got our podcast covering the TV show From. We're back on it, Scott. We're well behaved. We're doing good.
I'm so proud of us. By the time they're hearing this, another episode will be out because we're doing a great job with it, and we should feel proud of ourselves.
I've even watched the episode that we need to talk about next.
Oh my God, you're ahead of me.
Yeah.
That's not allowed.
I know.
And just to say, we have asked people to go there and sign up at the free level if they cannot afford to donate at any of the levels. We have a goal set in mind. We are going for 1,000 free or paying subscribers to our Patreon. We are, as of today, Matt, at 900. So, God, we're getting so close. I know there's 100 of y'all out there. I know.
Yeah,
I've seen you.
Tell your friends.
You.
Yeah.
So please subscribe to us on Patreon, even if it's at that free level. And please continue leaving those rating and reviews. As we talked about last week, we haven't gotten to read any of them out loud in a bit. but we are enjoying them. We do like them, and we appreciate you guys sending them in. I am going to stall for a second here because I do think I read a new one over on Audible.
Okay.
Because did you know Audible has reviews? If you listen,
I did not.
Did you know Audible has podcasts? It does.
Nope.
I didn't know that either.
Maybe I'll try listening to our podcast on Audible since every other podcasting app has failed me in some way.
I'm using Spotify now, which I'm mixed on. I can't find it, but I'll prepare this for next week.
Okay.
But please leave those rating and reviews; they really do help. And please continue to share the podcast as we move into the Midnight Club. I think I'm excited about this, Matt. There's a lot of mixed reactions to the show, and I'm really excited to get into it and figure out what we think about it.
I am too.
All right, folks, we will see you back here next week for Christopher Pike's The Midnight Club. Until then, don't be out in the sun too long, Mr. Flanagan. It's going to burn you.
I genuinely hope you enjoy the sunrise.
I hate her so much.
She's
I hate her so
the best.